You say you had this motion today. You were going to get crossbenchers from the government to support it. Of course, it was announced this would happen yesterday. It also came from a joint parliamentary committee that had supporters from both sides, the government and Labor. So what makes you think this wasn't going to go ahead?
Just want to ensure that there was bite in my answers. No, I haven't claimed anything, my friend. I just went and moved that there will be an inquiry in the Parliament and a number of backbenchers from the government, and I'm quite sure we had support from the Labor Party as well, went public and said they were seconding it. So it had serious bite. But you've got to understand that for 13 months, the Queensland government did nothing about a brutal, savage, fisticuffs attack upon some people who were ironically demonstrating, it was really a meeting, for freedom of speech. And what the University of Queensland proved conclusively is there is no freedom of speech at universities. The JCU were already out there proving that, but this was absolute proof. Now, there was no action taken by the Queensland Police until I went on 60 Minutes the second time and the Australian newspaper started running this big and aggressively. And then, and only then, 5 days after the second 60 Minutes interview, they moved to prosecute. 13 months, no prosecution, and it was all there on the television. A flagrant bashing, assault, proof, everything. Now, that was the first thing we achieved. The second thing we achieved was the government coming out with a catch-all, wide-ranging inquiry, which meant absolutely nothing. Churchill's famous phrase, if you must not do it, then you must hold a wide-ranging inquiry, and the wider the range of the inquiry, the less likely it is to hit any targets. And that's what was done by the Liberal National Party government. Now, there's a lot of pressure inside both parties here, but particularly inside the LNP. And late last night, 12 hours before I went to the House, and myself and Barnaby Joyce to move the motion, 12 hours before, in the middle of the night, Dutton announced the inquiry that we're after, which is the Parliamentary Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence. That's the inquiry we're after.
I think we had the details announced yesterday about midday. But look, regardless of the timing, can you briefly spell out what's your issue right now, your concern with universities and any influence from foreign powers that's happening at the moment?
Please, my friend, please. There are some young people expressing an opinion in support of their fellow Chinese students. It was not an anti-Chinese demonstration. It was a pro-Chinese, but it was most certainly an anti-Chinese government demonstration. And they were bashed. They were bashed. I mean, aren't you horrified and shocked in Australia that you get bashed and nothing is done about it to them? But the University of Queensland persecuted Pavlov.
What we're talking about, just to jump in there, if someone gets bashed, we've got laws around that. It's called assault, Bob Katter.
My friend, there's no laws. They were never prosecuted. 13 months later, no action had been taken on the laws. Now, there is also freedom of speech, the Offense versus Fairfax. It's part of the Constitution. The Constitution of Australia was flagrantly breached by the University of Queensland in closing down those discussions. But we don't stand idly by where citizens of this country are bashed because they expressed an opinion. Surely not. Now, the university then moved to punish this young man and his 12 disciples, as I call them, to punish them. They kicked him out of the university. They've gone a long way to destroying his career completely. They have banned him from campus, and they have taken him off the Senate, where he's elected by the student body. The outrageous nature of what the university has done here. They are puppets on a string, and the string has been pulled by the Brisbane Chinese consul.
I just want to get to a final topic on borders in Queensland and the state government's approach there. What's your view? Increased reports of what's happening with struggling tourism operators, including up north. Is it time for a little bit more nuance in the policy from Anastasia Palaszczuk?
Look, almost all of our Mackay, Cairns, almost all of our North Queensland tourism came from outside of Queensland. So we've been crippled and destroyed. We asked for quarantining of North Queensland. She refused to protect the 1 million people living in North Queensland. She was real quick to protect herself, Queensland being southeast Queensland, but she did nothing to protect us. Now, having done that, she has now murdered
well, hang on.
the entire
let's look at
industry of far north Queensland.
But you're on the one hand saying there should have been more protection before, you know, sort of separating off
for
this
north
part of
regional
Queensland.
Protection.
Yeah,
yes.
But
yes.
Well, that didn't happen, but it didn't need to if you look back on it. With the controls in place, we didn't get any major COVID outbreaks up there.
No. On the contrary, we had 23 cases. The last one was an employee of the Health Department of Queensland, a state government employee, was sent to the hospital in Cairns, and thank goodness only 3 people, that was what was reported in the media, only 3 people got the disease. But we had 23 cases, all of them came from southern Queensland. So we suffered.
Yeah, but that's not a major outbreak. If you want tourism operators to be able to get,
it's not a major...
get back and firing Bob Katter, you've got to countenance some element of COVID-19. Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing, living with it, not going down to 0 cases?
Well,
and in that case, tourism operators shuttered?
I represent parts of Cairns, my electorate, and our far north Queensland tourism was from overseas, so it's been smashed to pieces. We accepted that. Right? All we asked for was a quarantining of North Queensland to protect us. But the decision was made by her not to protect us, to protect them in southeast Queensland, but not to protect us. 154 doctors in North Queensland signed that petition. 154 doctors thought it was vitally important that we protect North Queensland, which has no coronavirus. But they kept sending us coronavirus cases from Brisbane, came up to North Queensland, infecting us. Well, thank goodness there was no outbreak. But we had the cases, all right. We suffered as a result of it, and we took all the brunt of our economy, a third of our North Queensland economy. Most of our economy is mining, of course, and sugarcane, but a third of our economy took a complete
But if you still are advocating that
tourism.
uber cautious approach of even hiving off North Queensland, you've got no hope of those tourism operators
we're not.
back up and running with people from New South Wales.
No. Now, after 2 weeks and every doctor signing the document, it was quite clear that the government of Brisbane was going to spit on us in North Queensland. So at that point, we reversed.
But was the protection needed if we look back at the low number of cases?
No. We had a relatively high number of cases in North Queensland. Relative to southeast Queensland, we had a higher proportion of outbreaks than southern Queensland. I mean, they got 5 million people, we've got 1 million people. Well, 4.5 million people they've got, and we've got 1 million. We had a higher outbreak.
Well, they had more than 20.
I mean, not only do we have the economic devastation, Tom, but we also had the disease as well. And thanks to her, you know, both were destroyed. Now, look, we accept the destruction of the tourism industry. We've never complained or kicked about that. But to have the other one as well was just a very bitter pill to swallow. But, Tom, these things go on for 3 years. If you look at SARS or Asian flu or any of these other ones, they'll go on for 3 years. I mean, what are we going to continue with this for 3 years? I don't know what's going to be left.
Well, I guess that's the question. Living with COVID is the point. Anyway, we might talk about it again another day. Bob Katter, thanks for your time today.